Joel Klatt, he played football at Colorado as well. It is interesting. Here's the argument for those that say Shedeur's dropping. I could argue this. Listen, not a special athlete. Been a couple of moments of immaturity we don't love. Not the end of the world. But he's probably closer to Jackson Dart as a talent than Cam Ward. So what's the point? We'll wait to the second round. Is that a legit argument from what you've seen?
I don't know. I mean, I think Shedeur is an incredible player. I think he is and should be a top 5 or 6 pick in the draft. I think what people fail to realize is that he was doing at the college level what he's going to be asked to do at the NFL level, not only schematically, but also think about this, Colin. How many times do we evaluate quarterbacks that are playing with far superior teammates than their opposition? All the time. That's all we do is evaluate. It's part of the reason why it's so difficult to evaluate college quarterbacks is because generally speaking, they're playing on really good teams and their teammates are far better than the opposition. That's not necessarily the case with Shedeur. He was playing behind a really bad offensive line, and he took a team that was going from 1 win and then ultimately wound up in the top 25 and won 9 games. Why? Because of him. So he had to raise the level of everybody around him. He did it without a running game. He did it without an offensive line. He's hyper accurate when he's on time in the pocket. He can create kind of from a magical standpoint and keep the play alive, similar to Fran Tarkington. I hear this narrative, and unfortunately, this is where we're at today in kind of the coverage of the NFL draft, is that the draft media or certain individuals within the league who are never going to draft this player to begin with start perpetuating these myths and these untruths about players stemming out of the combine. Like, we didn't like this guy. This guy is falling. And to be honest with you, I think that this type of storyline is lazy and it's rinse and repeat every year. You take the guy that is the most controversial in the draft, and then we end up having to talk about this exact subject because of lazy journalism and a big mouth scout. That's what happens every single year. But when you actually watch Shedeur, guy is excellent, man. He's got surgical capability. He's on time. He's accurate. He's smart. And he led a program from 1 win to 9, which is exactly what he's going to be asked to do in the NFL.
All right, Cam Ward. Cam Ward looks like a number 1 pick in terms of moves, arm. Anything that worries you about him, that he's a little off script? A lot of guys are early in their. Jaden Daniels was a lot of off script. It worked. My take is nobody's going to know what he is until Thanksgiving. So there's the element of the surprise in a weak division. I think he's actually going to play pretty well.
You know, I think Cam Ward is a really talented guy. There is a little element, Colin, I think you would agree with me, and we've talked about this a little bit. There's a little element of gunslinger to him. You know, He'll take some chances with the football down the field, but that's part of what makes him special, you know, and he believes and he trusts himself and his arm strength. I've loved Cam for a long time. And by the way, he played back in his days at Washington State, you know, with a surrounding cast that wasn't necessarily the best surrounding cast. So my same argument for Shedeur, you could also make for Cam. He had success behind what you could call poor offensive lines at the college level. So I think that that's actually a huge feather in his cap when you talk about the evaluation to the next level. I think he's going to have to just be careful from a turnover perspective because he will make throws that others are unwilling to make.
Sure.
But that does put the ball in precarious spots. And that's the only thing that I would say is it would be my only worry. It's not that I think it's going to happen. He may have to deal with a few unsightly turnovers early in his career in order to learn some of those lessons.
I was watching Ashton Jeanty footage about a week ago. And I did this years and years ago. There was a draft, and I was just going through. This was pre-YouTube, I think. Maybe it wasn't, but I remember seeing a bunch of video.
Man, the dark ages. Yeah, that's the dark ages.
And I saw Patrick Willis video, a bunch of it. And I went on the air, and I said, that's the best athlete in the draft. He went 11 to the Niners. And I said, I don't care. I am watching him chase down SEC running backs. Chase them down. And they're 4-4 guys. And he ended up having a great career. He retired, a little earlier, but he was a great player. And I was watching Ashton Jeanty footage the other day. And he had a little Saquon or 3 move, and I was like, yeah, that's not normal. Like, that's the stuff that's just God-given. And I kind of changed my mind from, it's a good running back draft. You can get 85% of them in the 4th round. I kind of probably think he may be the 3rd most athletic player in the draft after Abdul Carter and Travis Hunter. Where are you on the running back from Boise State?
I love Ashton Jeanty. I really do. I think that truth be told, like I believe that the number one attribute that a running back has to have, it's a prerequisite that you've got to be able to run the football. And he obviously does that in spades, but you've got to be able to catch it out of the backfield. I think you would agree with me on that. Like in this day and age, you've got to be a threat on every down and in every personnel group. And that means catching it out of the backfield. Now, some would say, and I think lazily, well, he didn't have a lot of catches last year. But if you actually just kind of peek behind the curtain of what last year was for Jeanty and more specifically for Boise State, they were very intently trying to win him the Heisman Trophy. The only way that he was going to have a chance to win the Heisman Trophy, Colin, is if he not only tested, but possibly beat Barry Sanders' yardage mark, mid-2000s, 2,500 yards. Well, you're not going to waste touches on catches if you're trying to get just rushing yards. So they gave it to him 28 times, but it was via handoffs so that yardage would be rushing yardage. Now, I firmly believe that. They have denied it, and I have talked to some of the coaches about this, but I firmly believe that they targeted 28, 29 touches, and why in the world would you give some of that receiving? Now, that doesn't mean he can't catch the ball. So I have heard, and maybe you have heard this or not, I have heard some people say like, well, I didn't love his catch production as a wide receiver, or a receiver out of the backfield, but he can do it. And it has been there in his history at Boise State. He's been a good receiver out of the backfield. So that's not a concern for me. So you go towards his special traits, his vision, his balance, and more specifically, Colin, his contact through, or excuse me, his balance through contact.
Oh, it's amazing.
No one brings him down. And I understand it's the Mountain West, and I've been, I'm a big conference snob. I'm not afraid to admit it. But you watch this guy play, man, and it's no one brings him down, and he just kind of bounces through contact. It's very beautiful. I have him going to the Cowboys in the 1st round in my mock draft, and he might not even last that long, really.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's a bad get. So the receiver from Arizona, it's a weak receiver draft. They say T-Mac. The other day they caught him on video saying, I don't watch football. I don't love film. It had a Johnny Manziel vibe. The difference is Johnny's a quarterback. He's a receiver. You have your receiver group. I watched 15 of his college games. Big catch radius, big kid, little bit of a glider, but after the catch, he's great. It doesn't bother me. But I could see a team saying, we'll get a receiver next round. What did you make of the comment?
Sure. Yeah, listen, he only needs one team to draft him. And there's going to be teams that are going to look past those comments. Like, what's he going to do? Watch film and be like, well, I can beat that guy.
Right.
I mean, he's physically so gifted that when you actually think about like what listen, this is going to sound bad, but it's like defensive tackles and receivers need to know the least amount of schematics on the field. It's like the receiver is literally like, can I beat this guy or not? Is he in a jam technique or a bump technique, or is he in off coverage? And that's kind of it, man. And defensive lineman is like left or right quarterback, bruh. So
yeah.
So I'm not as concerned with a guy that is maybe not a football junkie. If a safety said this, or if a tight end said this, or certainly a quarterback said this, I'd be like, okay, I don't love that, because they need to know so much of what's going on schematically on the field with all 22 chess pieces. Wide receiver, not so much. So I look at traits. He's big. He knows how to use his body, not only the catch radius, but I would say that the win percentage in contested catches is so high for him because of his instincts with the football. So to me, he screams as a number one receiver potentially. And for those reasons, someone is still going to have him high on their board, regardless of what he said about film.
Okay, I like a lot about Jalen Milroe. I like the body. I like the kid. I like the parents. But Kalen DeBoer had Michael Penix for years, often injured. And Kalen DeBoer struggled with him. I mean, you watch the first half against Vandy or Oklahoma, and I'm like, I got no interest. And then you watch other games, I think it was the second half against Georgia, and you're like, whoa, what do we got here? Throws a beautiful deep ball. And again, coachable, great kid. But, man, he was inconsistent at Bama. What is that? Why? What does the film say on Jalen Milroe?
Well, I think that Jalen Milroe suffers from what a lot of guys suffer from that are supremely athletically gifted at this position in particular. It is both a blessing and a curse to be as gifted as he is running the football. I think Lamar Jackson dealt with this in his career, in particular going back to Louisville. And I think that Jalen Milroe is dealing with this. When you have that trump card and that get out of jail free card, it stunts your growth as a pure passer. So he now doesn't just need to use like the schematics of the game and the control in the pocket and his ability to control things with his mind. Not that he can't. I'm just saying you don't have to do that when you can just leave the pocket and beat everybody as an athletic quarterback. I've had this conversation with a lot of guys, and I would just say, like, those of us that can't run, would we love to run? Yes. But what's the blessing of not being able to run? Well, you learn the entire game, and you learn all of your get out of jail cards that aren't your legs. And Milroe and those that can just athletically get out of jail free with their legs, they don't develop that. And eventually you're going to have that. So, Colin, what did we see? We saw growing pains. We saw a guy that was being asked to do things that he hadn't been asked to do before. And we saw that. And the question is can you overcome that? Lamar Jackson has been able to overcome that. Others have been able to overcome that, and that's going to be Jalen's charge. But he's really talented, and I will say this, like, he works incredibly hard. And it wasn't right away that Penix was able to succeed under Kalen DeBoer. You know, Penix at Indiana under DeBoer wasn't Penix. He was often injured. And then he transferred and went to Washington and started to have all that success with an unbelievable wide receiver core around him. And hopefully for Jalen, he can develop some of those traits moving forward.
Finally, you were drafted by a Major League Baseball team. You played minor league baseball. This torpedo bat's fascinating, where they've shifted a little weight to the barrel, to the label. I said it's like Gordon Ramsay's good regardless, but if you give him the freshest seafood and the freshest ingredients, it's jet fuel to a great chef. The Twins had it all last weekend and couldn't hit. The Yankees, who led baseball in homers last year, are off to a torrid start. What do you make of it?
Listen, I love it. I love the innovation. And my question is, I'll throw it back to you. How many home runs do you think they hit with regular bats? Probably a lot, to your point, right? Like, this is Ramsey with good ingredients. These are really good hitters. You know, you give it to a team that doesn't know how to hit, and it's like, well, are they going to do the damage that the Yankees were able to do? I'm not sure. I will tell you this, that the innovation in baseball has been very slow over the years. And this is something that I can get behind. And I just love, wasn't it the guy that was like he was like a scientist, and then didn't he work for NASA? And now all of a sudden he's in baseball and he invents this bat. I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, it's almost like HGH was creating great where great didn't exist. This is enhancing great where it already exists. You're just taking guys and saying, that line drive to short, that's a double. Or that line drive to short, and that drops in for a long single. So, I don't know.
And I believe that the theory is just that, like, you get higher exit velocity because the mass is greater at the point of contact. Yeah, isn't that the theory behind it?
Well, I dropped out of MIT after my second year, so I don't have that down yet.
Got it. I love it.
Good seeing you, buddy. Joel Klatt.
You as well. See you, dude.
All right.